Despite what you may think of Sonic Origins, definitely one of the coolest features that game has is the opening cutscenes for each of the games featured in that collection. Now this new modern generation doesn't have to go through all the settings to find a digital manual to know what exactly the story is within these games. But what if I told you these small, fun cutscenes give more insight into the bigger world of Sonic the Hedgehog, with the assistance of other official Sonic material and also other features present in this collection. But remember, this is all just a theory at the end of the day. A theory I like to call the Sonic Origins Island theory. So let's get into it, shall we?
Cigaro.
The way I formed this theory was in 4 parts. So naturally, I'm gonna do the same thing while presenting it to you, just to ease your mind into it because it can get a bit crazy sometimes. Starting off with part 1, Anthropomorphic Locals. In the opening cutscene for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, we get to see how Tails met Sonic, as well as see the bullies that Tails encountered back in the day. And they so happen to be the same species as Tails, which got me thinking. As mentioned in the first Tails Tube video on the YouTube channel of Sonic the Hedgehog, being a video series dedicated to showcasing newcomers, different elements of the Sonic the Hedgehog universe and explaining thoroughly on how things work within it, they of course explain that the bigger countries are home to the humans, while the smaller islands are dedicated to the anthropomorphic animals of the series, that being Sonic and friends. Which is a pretty decent way of explaining how the humans and anthropomorphic animals exist on the same planet. And we do technically have proof of this, like South Island from the first Sonic game did technically appear in Sonic Forces and had a bunch of anthropomorphic animals present, but not any humans at all, so this makes sense. And then this is where I thought to myself, what if we could take this idea further? Maybe each Pacific island is dedicated and native to a Pacific anthropomorphic animal. We already have proof that the Echidna clan is very prominent within Angel Island, so maybe that's the case with Westside Island and they have a bunch of foxes there, and then maybe there's an island dedicated to crocodiles, cats, bats, chameleons, bees, you name it. And this almost, keyword there being almost, led to me giving the conclusion that Sonic the Hedgehog lives in the South. You know what I'm saying? But I realized that might not be true. And before we get into all that shenanigans, what exactly does that mean for South Island? Who used to live there? Which brings us to part 2, the original natives. Within the first Sonic game, which takes place on South Island, we get to see a lot of bird/owl imagery in a way, with of course the totems in Green Hill Zone and the structures you get to see in Labyrinth Zone. And this was the inspiration for the owl clan, I guess you could say, in the Sonic movies. But I'm not saying an owl took care of Sonic way back when. I'm not sure if that really fits within the regular modern Sonic lore, even though it technically can in some extent, but we'll deal with that later. But one thing I do want to take into account is that there's a possibility that owls did use Chaos Emeralds in the modern Sonic universe and technically live on South Island, which makes sense since the backstories of the island and this type of creature mesh really well together. I'm not sure if anybody noticed this, but South Island seems to be the only place that Sonic has been to that doesn't have any bad history with the Chaos Emeralds. I mean, of course, we got Angel Island where, you know, we got the Echidna clan hungry for power and all that. And that's technically also the case for Westside Island if you look at the Japanese manual. And of course, don't get me started on the modern Sonic games. But yeah, South Island seems to be the exception. The only thing that it has connecting it to the Chaos Emeralds, that being the fact that, well, it moves across the ocean thanks to the power of the Chaos Emeralds, in a way. And when Sonic used the Chaos Emeralds at the end of the game, it just made the island a lot more healthier. That's pretty much it. No gods of destruction being summoned or anything like that. It's a pretty good deal to be on South Island. The Chaos Emeralds won't bother you. And of course, the Chaos Emeralds in the movies don't really have any specific bad history with the owls right now because, well, all they really did was try to protect them from people who want them for just, power. So right, that's taken care of. South Island is native to the owls. But what about Sonic's beloved species of hedgehogs? Where did they originally come from? Yeah, sure, maybe Sonic made Green Hill his home considering he, been there a couple of times and they technically mentioned it in Sonic Prime. But what was his original home? And this is probably a good chance to remind you all that this is just a theory at the end of the day, even with all the evidence that kind of prove it to be probably pretty true in some extent. But again, it's still a theory. And even if there is a chance that this is actually canon one day in the future, remember, that doesn't, stop you from thinking otherwise. Again, you can still think stuff like maybe Sonic CD takes place after Sonic 2 and all that. Sega isn't stopping you. That's the true meaning behind everything is canon. And that's not going to be changing anytime soon. Is that clear? Let's get to part 3. That being Amy's placement. What do I mean by that? Well, of course, the Sonic Origins cutscenes do follow what was stated in the Japanese manuals for these games. To some extent, there are some things that they didn't mention, like the backstory of the Chaos Emerald, which, I understand that really isn't that necessary for the overall plot for these games, but one minor change that a lot of people don't really notice is in the opening cutscene for Sonic CD. In the original Japanese manual for Sonic CD, it is stated that Amy used his fortune card telling to find out that her knight in shining armor would be present at Never Lake, convincing her to go there. But in the cutscene found in Sonic Origins, Amy was already at Never Lake, and she used the cards just simply to let her know that yes, this is the spot where you're gonna find your knight in shining armor. A little bit different there, but enough to make a cool theory. Yeah, you can already tell how this is a pretty wild one. One thing I noticed with the 4 games present in Sonic Origins is that each title introduced a Pacific character, and the Pacific character actually lives in the island that the whole adventure takes place in. Like Tails lives in West Side Island, and of course Knuckles lives in Angel Island.
I'm originally from West Side Island, which is where Sonic and I first met.
But what about Amy? I kinda have an idea. So I kinda think that maybe in this continuity, in the brand new continuity that they're making, Amy lives somewhere nearby Never Lake, maybe in some sort of hedgehog town. Something similar to what we see in the Japanese comic way back in the day. And funny enough, concept art for that comic actually appears in the museum for Sonic Origins, so yeah. And this is what I have to say again, that this is gonna be a pretty wild theory, and it's just a theory right now, so I understand if you find this to be a bit odd, especially since how the reactions were to the little twists found in Sonic Frontiers. So yeah, there you go, it's technically on the same level as that. So we all know that the level design in Sonic CD is a little bit weird and wacky, I guess. With how the levels are structured in the game, in a narrative sense, this does feel like something that only bouncy and speedy entities can maneuver easily, especially since we have time travel mechanics which definitely need the use of speed. And considering that some anthropomorphic animals in this series do technically come from space to some extent, like the Babylon Rogues, and even recently with the Dampar, who is a Tanuki from outer space as well, it wouldn't be far off to assume that maybe the hedgehogs could have lived originally on Little Planet, and of course due to the fact that it comes to Earth every time, every few months, it kind of leads to some hedgehogs deciding to migrate to Earth. Which leads us into part 4, the Hedgehog Way. So since the other creatures from outer space do make some sort of impact on Sonic's planet, it's safe to assume that at least the hedgehogs did something as well. And maybe they did something very prominent. While I was creating this theory, I realized that, well, moving past the whole idea of Sonic the Hedgehog being a transformed version of this hedgehog named Nicky, the family that was showcased in those comics was actually a pretty decent interpretation of Sonic's family. especially with Sonic's dad, who's actually a pilot, which could actually make sense because maybe he's the one who gifted Sonic's beloved biplane, maybe on his birthday, which is why apparently Sonic the Hedgehog's events take place on Sonic's birthday, and that's why Sonic Generations also takes place on Sonic's birthday. You know what I mean there. But yeah, I then realized that on Sonic's plane, there's a little symbol, a little nice star symbol, which of course is very prominent in some of the Sonic logos and such. And that made me think that, oh, maybe this is a cool idea. Maybe this could be the symbol for the hedgehog species in general. And then I realized something. I remembered that some of the game mechanics within the Sonic games have this star symbol to them. Of course, one of the most prominent ones being the springs. And that got me thinking, what if the Hedgehog clan actually invented all these springs and such throughout the worlds of Sonic the Hedgehog to help the natives traverse the terrain of loop-de-loops and such a lot more easily? And maybe they even invented the capsule, since there is a balloon-shaped capsule with the star symbol as well. So yeah, maybe they have invented the speed shoes as well. I mean, it kind of makes sense since they probably invented the time travel poles that we see in Sonic CD. Again, I do admit this is a pretty wild theory, but it does give some pretty interesting possibilities for Sonic games. For one, we could have a fun 2D prequel to Sonic 1, where we get to see Sonic possibly take down Anton Veruca maybe from the Japanese comic, and maybe get to see Amy in the background just admiring Sonic, and this is how Amy got in tune to who Sonic the Hedgehog was. And maybe this is the time where Sonic met Vector or maybe even Charming, since they don't really interact and they just kind of became Sonic's friends later down the line. So maybe this is a way to, you know, help fix that in a way. And then of course on the 3D side of things, maybe of course in the future we could have a open world with the classic physics, and those classic physics can be utilized in a Sonic CD-like setting with the time travel poles, or just time travel in general. Maybe you can just activate it with a button. Maybe there can be puzzles where you have to do something in the past and then you have to use the classic physics and go through slopes to gain speed to time travel into the past, do something there, and then go back to the present and finish the puzzle. That could be pretty cool. So that's pretty much it for my theory. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope more people do this as well in the future, because I feel like this is the perfect time for people to get into the whole theorizing wagon, because right now the people over there in Sega and Sonic Team are trying their best to mesh the different elements from different games together into one cohesive universe. And of course that will take time. And they're slowly talking about what specific elements of the games are canon and non-canon. But it does lead into people asking more and more questions, of course. But while we wait for those answers, why don't we just have some fun and, you know, theorize what could possibly be canon? And it could actually be useful for the, I guess, what we're calling the lore masters, because if we create more theories and get more people to watch them and react to it and see if they dislike or like how this could work in the universe, they could actually take note of it and see what could be a good compromise to make sure at least a decent part of the Sonic community will be okay with. So, with that said, guys and gals, life is a pineapple patch. Oh god, my legs. Oh.